Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Why Admins Should Use the Microsoft Power Platform Center of Excellence Starter Kit, featuring our special guest, Rene Modery. My name is Patrick, and I am a sales manager here at Syskit. Here with me is Rene and our star of the day, and my colleague Bruno, who will be showing you a demo of Syskit Point later on. Many of you already know Syskit as a company, but for those who don't, let me briefly introduce you. Syskit is a software development company founded more than 14 years ago. We develop products for Microsoft 365 governance and security, as well as for SharePoint on-prem administration. We currently have more than 3,500 customers around the world, ranging from small businesses to large corporations. We have 4 products, including our award-winning SP Kit for SharePoint on-prem, as well as our flagship product, Syskit Point for Microsoft 365 governance. Before we start, just a few housekeeping items. All registrants will receive a recording of the webinar within a few days. After the presentation, we will have a short demo of Syskit Point showing how it can help you govern your Microsoft 365 workspaces. After that, we will have a Q&A session where Rene will answer any questions you may have. Please use the Q&A function on the right side of the screen to ask your questions throughout the webinar. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our special guest. Rene Modery is the 12-time Microsoft M365 Apps and Services MVP, working as a Power Platform Tech Lead in Singapore. His technical scope covers 10 tenants and more than 105,000 users across the globe. For more than 15 years, Rene has lived and worked in Europe and Asia Pacific. His main focus currently is the Power Platform, including effective governance and management. In previous roles, he worked extensively with SharePoint and Office 365. I will now give a warm welcome and turn things over to Rene. Rene, are you ready?
Yes, hi Patrick, thank you very much. I'm ready, just about to start sharing my screen. Good, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. So today I want to talk about why Power Platform administrators should consider using the Microsoft Power Platform Series Starter Kit. We'll talk about it in a lot more detail. There was just a big introduction about myself, so again, there's probably not too much else to say about myself. Microsoft MVP 12 times. I just realized the screenshot is already says 11. 12 times MVP. Started working with SharePoint, moved on to Office 365, focused then again on the Power Platform. And in the past few years, I've been working now at WPP as Power Platform Technical Lead with, again, a main focus on governing the platform mostly, but also responsible for anything from a technical point of view. As mentioned, the scope is actually 10 tenants. So as you can imagine, we are looking at a lot of ways how we can simplify things, how we get more insights, more value, more everything out of the Power Platform from an administrative management operations point of view. And that's basically a lot of, I don't call it experience, but basically a lot of things that I personally experienced came into this presentation here. And while I talk a lot and just showcase a lot of things that are part of the series starter kit, I'll explain then why I think certain things are really valuable to anyone who, why you should consider using it. Now, that was as much as about me as I wanted to say. Now about you, I mean, I don't know who you are, why you're attending, etc. But my assumption is that one of those following items here, or maybe one or more of the following items apply to you. So either responsible for the administration of the Power Platform in your organization or responsible for the adoption of the Power Platform. Likely you're trying to figure out how the Power Platform overall gets used in your organization because you say, yeah, we've got some apps, we've got some flows, but I want to learn more about who's creating flows, how many do we have each month, who's our top maker for Power Apps, etc. Maybe you're trying also to see how we can get more value out of the Power Platform because you know that there are citizen developers around. They are creating apps and flows and maybe even creating bots, etc. But you want to really get more targeted value out of it. And lastly, maybe you also think about, we're not really governing the Power Platform properly right now. We should really do some more there, because right now everybody can do whatever they want. Maybe that's not the right approach right now. But yeah, so basically, that's basically how I think what might apply to you and what you probably are trying to get out of this session here. So just to set some general comment, just to make sure that we're all on the same basic level when it comes to talking about the CoE. So whenever I say CoE, it's not just any specific center of excellence that I'm referring to, but I'm specifically talking about, obviously, Microsoft Power Platform Center of Excellence Starter Kit, which is quite a long term, quite a mouthful. Obviously, shortening it to CoE simplifies it a lot. So when I say CoE, I'm not talking about a division, a part of the company or so that's responsible for managing the Power Platform or something like that. I'm specifically talking about Microsoft Toolkit. And that toolkit is a free collection of components and tools that can help you get started with, as it mentioned below, developing a strategy for adopting and supporting Microsoft Power Platform. So it's really something that should help you with your additional Power Platform efforts. So if you're a Power Platform developer, a maker, citizen developer who simply said just creating apps, creating flows, you might not be too interested in the Power Platform Center of Excellence Toolkit, obviously. But if you're really responsible for saying, yes, I'm the Power Platform guy in my organization, I'm responsible for administrating the Power Platform, then you're the right person, then that's the right topic for you here right now today. The first thing you might wonder is, hey, there's the Power Platform Admin Center. Why do I need another toolkit actually? I mean, doesn't the Power Platform Admin Center already help me? I mean, I can create environments here. I see some billing statistics. I see some analytics. I see resources, etc. Yeah, there's a good amount, obviously, that you can and should be doing in the Admin Center. But the CoE Toolkit is not meant as a replacement for the Admin Center. Rather, they're obviously working nicely together here. So Power Platform Admin Center is not getting replaced by the CoE, but the CoE enhances the PPAC a lot. So there's a lot more things that are not available in the PPAC, but which you can get through the CoE. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What are those things that might not be possible in the Power Platform Admin Center or might be a bit tricky through the Power Platform Admin Center, and how can the CoE Toolkit help you there? Now, from my point of view, and I just realized it still says write something here, so please ignore that. From my point of view, the CoE supports you mainly with three different areas. One, it gives you a lot of additional insights. For example, how do you know how many apps and flows do you have? How do you know who created those apps and flows? Who are those people, etc.? Yeah, you can get some information, obviously, in the Power Platform Admin Center, but it's very environment-based. So it doesn't give you that big overview of everything that you have. That's where the CoE truly shines. It gives you that big overview of everything that you have, and you can start drilling down, filtering, whichever way you want, whichever you think would be helpful and useful for you. Second, it allows you to establish certain governance processes to support both you as administrator as well as the citizen developers, because obviously once you put some citizen developer tools out there, apps, flows available for them to create for them, yeah, they will do some things that they maybe shouldn't be doing, or maybe they want to do something but they can't. You get the idea. It's better to establish some proper governance so that people know what are they allowed to do, what are they not allowed to do, but also how can they get supported through certain processes. An example, how do you request a new environment? When do you request a new environment? What's the process? Who reviews, who approves, etc.? That's something that the CoE can help you with. And lastly, adoption. I mean, the CoE is obviously a very data-driven toolkit. It doesn't run any training sessions for you. Still something you need to do yourself. But there's a range of additional things here within the CoE that allow you then to reach out to your makers, help support your adoption overall. There are obviously additional things that need to be done. Just deploying the CoE doesn't immediately result in additional adoption, but it makes it a bit easier to communicate with your makers, to figure out who do you need to talk to. Those kind of things then are well supported by the CoE. So let's dive into these three sections in more detail and look at them in a bit more with a bit more information. Getting started with insights. I mean, one important thing is when you think about, again, coming back to Power Platform Admin Center. If I ask you, how many apps and flows are there in your tenant, and you have to access, and you only have access to the Power Platform Admin Center, how can you figure it out? Yeah, you could go to each and every single environment that you have and start counting your apps and flows, and probably need to write it down and then do your sums, and then after a while you could tell me. Not very efficient, obviously. Or if I asked you, how many environments do you have? How many of them are active? How many then are inactive? When were they created? That's already a bit better. There's something that you can do in the Power Platform Admin Center. But again, the Admin Center is mostly meant to administrate those environments, but it doesn't give you additional insights into the environments. For example, how many of your environments are actually empty? How many environments do you have that don't have a single app or a single flow in them? Really nothing in there. You created them, but nothing was ever done. You might not figure that out easily through the Power Platform Admin Center. Yes, you can go into, again, each and every environment and check, yeah, is there something in there or not? But if you've got 20, 50 environments, nobody likes to spend an hour or two just going through and checking them individually. Rather, you want to go somewhere and see immediately, yeah, I've got 3 environments, no apps and flows in there. Maybe they're good candidates to be deleted. Lastly, obviously, you also want to know who created them and when. For example, do you have a flow that was created 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago? Is it still running? Isn't it running? Was it maybe created by somebody who left the organization? Maybe you have a critical flow running by somebody who left the organization, and yeah, you don't know about it. Yeah, lots of questions here. So that's where the CoE then obviously shines a lot. What it helps you with here is, let me just do this one here. It gives you these insights into what kind of inventory do you have here overall within the Power Platform. So you can easily see then how many environments do you have, when were they set up, how many apps are there, how many flows are in there, who are the top app makers, maybe because maybe you want to provide them with some special support. Maybe you want to talk to the top app maker and say, hey, I saw you create 3 apps in the last month and 5 in the previous month. That's great. How can I support you? Maybe you want to figure out how many custom connectors are in use, because maybe there's a lot happening that shouldn't be happening through custom connectors. Or separately, maybe there's, I don't know, 3 different custom connectors for the same, you could say, API. Maybe you want to standardize it a bit and support them the right way. All of that is something that you can figure out through the CoE toolkit then. So it provides you with that big overview through a customizable dashboard where you can then see what is in your Power Platform. If you don't know what's in there, how can you manage it? How can you govern it? It's quite difficult, because if you think about it, if you only have access to the Power Platform Admin Center, you're just thinking, we've got a lot of apps and flows, but I don't know who our top makers are. And you know that there are things out there, but you don't have a lot of additional insights. And really, with the current information provided through the CoE, then that's where you get a lot of additional value, basically. You can start drilling down, figure out where are your people, who are they, who's creating a lot of apps and flows, etc., etc. Additionally, then, what you can also do is then you can also then get that review of your apps and flows in a bit more detail, because if you want to see, hey, I know that we've got a specific app somewhere, what kind of connectors it's actually using. So that's something that you can do. You can review, specific app, who created it, who has it been shared with? So how many people has it been shared with? Is it maybe only one person? Is it the whole company? What kind of connectors is it using? Is it connecting, for example, only to SharePoint and Office 365, or is it connecting to some external systems, Dropbox, maybe ServiceNow or something else? There's a lot of additional information that you can actually then find here and where you can start drilling down. Just think about it. I mean, if you just look at the Power Platform Admin Center, you've got insights that are there. You know, there are apps and flows. But if I ask you right now, for example, how many apps do you have that use the ServiceNow connector? yeah, you could maybe run a PowerShell report to export some information or so. In the Power Platform Admin Center, you don't get that information. But with the CoE toolkit, you can easily then review that information, immediately see, hey, what are our apps that use a specific connector? Because maybe you are planning to, I don't know, no longer use ServiceNow and switch to another tool or something like that. Or maybe you're saying, no, we actually want to figure out how many people are connecting to ServiceNow because we're considering establishing a central ServiceNow instance, and we want to figure out if there are people leveraging other instances or something like that. So again, all of that can be done here through the CoE quite easily. Once you deployed it, once you've got the dashboards there, then you can see those insights really fairly up to date on a daily basis. You get additional information, current information, and then you can see then what else is happening. Now, it's not just obviously about, sorry, just let me take one step back. Now, the very important thing here about those insights is then obviously those insights help you then drive additional processes. So when you think about what kind of information do you see here, do you have here, all of that obviously is not just something you look at once and forget about it, but rather it helps you with additional decisions. So I just described a few of them, but if you think about it, you might want to then think ahead in terms of, yeah, maybe we want to see what are the top connectors. What are connectors that are used quite a lot, because we want to figure out what are systems a lot of our people are using and connecting to. Or the other way, maybe we have a very, I don't know, popular system internally that gets used a lot. Again, coming back to ServiceNow, if nobody's using the ServiceNow connector, maybe there's a way to say, oh, we have ServiceNow, it's quite important to us, but nobody's using the connector. That's strange, because there could be alerts set up separately. Maybe there's some other insights that could be gained by, I don't know, automatically submitting a ticket through a Power Automate workflow into ServiceNow or something like that. So there are ways how you can then figure out, yeah, what else could be done. It helps you with planning further activities, further steps, further discussions. And again, it's not just about the technology itself that's used, but also about the people. So as mentioned, you can easily see here, for example, here in the screenshot, it's a bit small, but you get the idea. Who are the top makers? You can see, wow, there's one maker who has created something like nearly 300 apps. Here's a guy who created more than 300 flows, which is really good, but it's maybe also a bit of a concern. Oh, there's one guy with 300 flows. What if he leaves the organization tomorrow? That's a bit of a concern. Maybe we need to identify those top makers and start talking to them about service accounts. They should not have that many flows running under themselves, but rather have dedicated service accounts, so that in case they leave the organization, flows still keep running under the dedicated service account or something like that. So really, you understand, I think, hopefully, those insights that you get here is not just, yeah, there's some random numbers and you get some summaries, etc. But all that information will then really help you to make, again, further decisions, make further, plan further actions, and really see what else can be done. And obviously, that depends also on your organization, on your goals, etc. So there's no three-step process after you deploy the CoE toolkit. What are the things that need to be doing? You might have different priorities. Maybe you say, no, we don't have service accounts, and if he leaves, then yes, we have a process to transfer those 300 flows to somebody else. Might be. Maybe you say, oh, it's very important to us actually then to keep the number of environments low. We've got too many environments. This is now we can figure out what are the environments with a low number of apps and flows, so they can then transfer those apps and flows over to other environments, as an example. Or separately, the reverse, obviously, you say, hey, there's, 145 apps in this particular environment. Do we really need to have that many in that environment? Maybe, yeah, we've got too many big environments with a large number of apps and flows. Maybe there's a demand to split them up for, again, compliance reasons, security reasons, organizational reasons, etc. Again, depending on what your priorities are, what you want to do, then the information that you can potentially get out of here is then really the extremely helpful part. Now, with that information, obviously, there are also certain things that will then need to be driven. So the governance processes. Now, governance is obviously a big topic, and the CoE toolkit is not just fixing things for you. It's a toolkit. Governance process still need to be looked at separately, but you need to think about certain processes. We just talked about environments. So how can we automate, for example, environment requests? When somebody requests a new environment, do we create it right away? Do you want to review it? Do you create it manually? Should we create it automatically? Or if you think about data loss prevention policies, if you're using them already, yeah, you know that sometimes they're a bit challenging because there's no way for you to easily figure out once you update a data loss prevention policy, will a certain flow stop because maybe you just blocked that certain connector that the flow is using, and yeah, you might just interrupt the production critical process. Is there basically an easier way to manage your DLPs then? Now, the big part and the last comment here is then how can we now effectively manage the overall life cycle of the Power Platform components? So how do we know when somebody creates an app, should we talk to that guy immediately, or should we talk to him maybe after his app is in use by a range of people? Or what if there's suddenly an app that, I don't know, is no longer required, or flow that's no longer required? What happens with it? What if we have a flow that, I don't know, was turned on 7 years ago, was turned off 6 years ago, but the flow is still there? Should we actually delete it? Again, if you just look at the Power Platform Admin Center, yeah, it's a bit tricky here, obviously. You need to think about your custom solutions here. The CoE toolkit, as probably expected, comes here with some ways to support you. So looking, for example, at the environment request process. Again, how many environments do you need? Do you need, I don't know, a standard environment for everybody besides the default environment? Do you set up just 3 more environments, one for development, one for testing, one for production? Do you create an environment per team, per department, per application? There's a lot of questions here, and the CoE toolkit is not going to answer those questions for you because they're, again, depending on your maybe a corporate your size of your company, the compliance standards that you might have. Maybe you need to separate certain applications from each other, make sure that they're in completely separate environments. Maybe you don't want to create too many environments and just keep your dev, test, prod environments. It's up to you. Either way, if you allow your colleagues to request environments, you need to think about what do you do here. The CoE toolkit provides you with a way to say, there's a way to basically then have an automated process here. When you request a new environment, what should happen? Should it go through a review process? If yes, who needs to be approved? Plus, if somebody requests something and is no longer required, for example, should it be deleted? Maybe it should be cleaned up after a certain amount of time because it's really only required for a small proof of concept. So you need it for 60, 90 days afterwards. Yeah, let's delete it. Let's get rid of it. CoE toolkit, again, provides you here with that environment request process, allowing you to really have that standardized way to request for something, review, approve, have it automatically created. Maybe you also have other systems in place, coming back again to ServiceNow, or maybe you've got some other tool in place, doesn't matter. Again, you might handle it separately. You don't have to use that process that's part of the CoE toolkit, but it gives you at least one potential option that you could look at. Now for the life cycle of things, for example, one important thing that I mentioned is, for example, if something gets created, how do you know if it's important or not? And how do you know if it is even still required or not? So what can you do here then to figure that out? One thing is to know, for example, if something is still needed, you could use then the inactivity parts of the CoE toolkit. So saying, hey, if a flow doesn't run or has not been modified in a while, maybe we should just ask the owner of that flow and ask him, is the flow actually still required? Or if you have an app that, I don't know, hasn't been used in a couple of months and it hasn't been launched, like I said, in a couple of months, hasn't been modified, do we still need it? Because we know, there's a lot of there are a lot of apps and flows usually that get created, and maybe just for testing purposes, and then they just sit on the Power Platform. Nobody's using them. Maybe they should be removed after some time, because maybe you want to make sure that you've got relatively clean environments. For example, coming back to the example I had before, yes, maybe you've got an environment with 20 apps and 10 flows, but what if those 20 apps and 10 flows haven't been in use in the past 3 years? You might just say, there's an environment, we've got 30 components in there, all good, we'll just leave it. But if it's not in use, do you really need it? So you could potentially clean it up. Again, there's that automated process that could be used then here. It really helps you then with governing the lifecycle a bit better, making sure then inactive components get removed. Separately, then obviously, you might also think about how can I actually properly make sure that things that are business critical get properly supported. Imagine somebody creates an application that gets shared with the whole company, and it's really a company critical application. You might want to learn more about that, obviously, not just, let it run by itself, because maybe you want to have that inventory of, hey, what are our critical apps in the organization that we have here? Because you might want to provide dedicated support for them, or you might want to make sure that they follow proper security and compliance standards. Maybe you want to see that they're running under service count, or etc., etc. There's a range of things that you might want to review. What you can do with the CoE toolkit, you can now set certain thresholds and say, whenever, for example, an app is shared with the whole company, the whole tenant, please, we want to know more about that app, and then just email the app owner and ask them for more information. You could also set another threshold and say, once an app is shared with, 5 people, 10 people, 50 people, that's what I want when I want to learn more about it. And the idea here is really that you introduce a process to learn more about those production apps. You don't care about those test 3 apps, obviously, that somebody creates and might share with a colleague or so. Test app 3 shared with a colleague is not business critical. If it gets, interrupted or so, very likely there's no impact to the company. But your leave request app shared with the whole company, everybody's using it. If that app has an issue and there's no proper support model, it might be a very risky thing actually to keep it like that. So you want to proactively make sure that, hey, if there's that citizen developer created app that gets, a lot of usage, for example, you want to know about it, you want to learn more about it, etc. So yes, definitely make use of this process here. And the last thing around governance process that I want to talk about is analyzing the impact of a data loss prevention policy. So I mentioned before, you can set data loss prevention policies in the Power Platform. You can easily do that in the Power Platform Admin Center. And we think about how the Power Platform Admin Center looks like. If you ever created it, it looks very much like the screenshot that you see here. The only difference, or the main difference here, is if you look at what's possible in the Power Platform Admin Center is, there's no way for you to figure out if a DLP has any impact on anything. So you update your DLP, you click save and apply, basically, you might actually stop any running flows because you might have just blocked, for example, the ServiceNow connector. Maybe a flow is using that ServiceNow connector. It's now in conflict with the DLP and gets suspended. Maybe it was a critical flow again. Maybe you just interrupted somebody's very important work, etc. So it's always good to see, hey, what's the impact of a DLP before you apply it? So before I say I'm going to block ServiceNow, I want to see what's the impact, which flows and apps are impacted by it, so that I can have a discussion with the app and flow owners. And I can say from personal experience, we started with no DLP, and then we decided, yes, we've got a certain set of rules. We have certain connectors that we want to block and certain connectors that are allowed. We want them to really make sure that we're not interrupting anything, and that's why we used then the CoE toolkit with that DLP editor here to perform that impact analysis. Our data loss prevention policy does interrupt a number of apps and flows. And who are the owners of those app and flows? And let's talk to them. See, hey, we want to actually apply DLP. There might be an interruption, which we want to avoid. is it, I don't know, what is your app, your flow doing? Separately, we can then also actually, for example, exempt those apps and flows. That's another action then. But again, you get some additional value out of it that's really not right there in the Power Platform Admin Center. So that's why I said before, it doesn't replace the Power Platform Admin Center, but it enhances it. So it really provides you that additional value here. And now talking about value, I mean, one important thing is adoption, because Power Platform obviously lives because of its citizen developers and the people using those apps and flows. And obviously adoption means you want to see more people using apps. And that obviously happens mainly, for example, through supporting your makers properly, your citizen developers properly, but also making sure that, again, as mentioned, those apps, for example, that are used heavily, maybe provide a better support model so that, yeah, they're not constantly interrupted. People don't like to use them. It's all very bad. People complain, etc. Rather, maybe, hey, if an app goes down, you know about it quickly. You've got your support in place. You've got the right people to help out, and an hour later, app is back up, and people didn't even have time to realize that the app didn't work or so. So adoption really is then, how can you ensure that current but also potential future citizen developers are well supported? Focusing here mainly on the citizen developers, but that obviously that reach when it comes to adoption also goes beyond them then obviously to any users, but it starts with the citizen developers. So for example, when I say citizen developers, who are they? They are the ones obviously who create apps and flows. When should you start supporting them? From my point of view, and obviously also from Microsoft point of view, ideally before they even do something, but it might be difficult to reach out to people who haven't done anything, who think about something if you don't know them actually. So first step would be the moment they create an app or flow or something else, for example, in Power Platform, you would know about it thanks to the CoE, because the CoE creates that inventory. CoE knows, hey, Rene just created a new app. It's his first app ever. That's why you can trigger that welcome process. Now, this is obviously a standardized email that you see here, but it's customizable. So while this looks very, Microsoft-ish, let's call it that way, what you can do here in this welcome email, customize it to your own company needs. Do you have maybe a dedicated team in Microsoft Teams where you support your citizen developers? Do you have a separate Viva Engage community? Do you have, I don't know, another community in another system or so where people get together? Do you have, I don't know, weekly, monthly internal webinars? And you've got a SharePoint site where people can find more information about this. Provide them with all that information here. Let them know where they can go to find more information about, who's the Power Platform team? Who can they talk to if they have questions? Where can they find further help? What kind of support models are there? What kind of service models are there? Where can they find training opportunities? What kind of other events are taking place internally? All of that should go into that very first welcome email, because the moment somebody creates that first app or flow, they receive that welcome email and immediately they hopefully then know everything in terms of where do I need to go if I have any question, when I need help. And that's how you start supporting your citizen developers right at the very beginning. This welcome email is really a key step to get somebody started, because they're not just an individual somewhere in the organization who's creating something, but they become part of that Power Platform community in your organization. They learn where to go, etc., and they can start to reach out to other people. Separately, then obviously, as mentioned, you might have Teams-based community, Viva Engage community, or something like that, where people can get together, exchange information, ask questions, etc. But if you don't tell people about it, people won't go there. And again, this welcome email is the perfect place to get that started. Second, you might already have a range of people who actually are doing things, but sometimes you want to check in with them, for example, get some feedback from them, ask them some questions. Obviously, you could do that through a range of different ways. You could do it through a Microsoft Forms survey, for example. You could send them a manual email, ask them, hey, Rene, You've been creating a lot of emails recently. How are things going or so? But if you're targeting a lot of people, you might again consider that automated process to get additional insights. So ask everybody the same question every 6 months, for example, or a range of questions basically. So, and that's where you've got that feedback functionality. Ask your makers, your citizen developers, is there anything else that they need? Is there something that they're missing? What else do they want to have? Do they need more training? Was there too much training, etc., etc.? Really reach out to them. Communications is obviously a bigger part. The CoE doesn't solve all your communication questions and issues, but again, it's one way to continue that discussion. And citizen developers, your makers, the app creators, etc., you need to follow up with them regularly. Don't just send them the welcome email and leave them alone for years, never talk to them again. No, check in with them regularly, for example, through the community, through those surveys, through other ways potentially as well. Now, one part, as mentioned, is then supporting the citizen developers. The other part is then also sometimes people say, I don't want to create my own app. I don't want to create my own flow, but I've got that idea. I've got a business problem. You really want to make sure that people can have an area where they can actually then submit their ideas. There's that innovation backlog now in the CoE toolkit that then allows you to capture those ideas. Because if you're only a small organization, maybe it's a bit of a too big thing. You can review it if it makes sense. But if you're a large organization, or if you want to have that standardized process of reviewing any ideas for potential new tools, that's where you could make use of that. The idea of the innovation backlog is that if somebody has got, again, a business problem or an idea how to solve a business problem, they can go in here and submit their idea, their problem, their suggestion. They say, hey, I thought about this. We've got currently a problem with our, HR joiners, movers, leavers process because it's all manual. We fill out a lot of Word documents. It's a lot of overhead work. I don't even know where the completed Word documents are, or Word documents in progress are somewhere. There should be a better way of doing that. Plus, I think if we do that, we can save, 20 hours per week. So yeah, something like that should be captured here so they can then review what should be done here. Again, it's not something where we ask people, submit your idea and then you do your own stuff. Rather, submit your ideas and then we can see if we can support you. Again, you might have other processes in the organization to work on that. Maybe you've got some dedicated innovation team, IT business partner to speak to, or really somebody else responsible to drive any application development or so. But this would be a good starting point to just capture potential requests and review them. And the idea is not, hey, anything that comes in here will get developed, but you will get an idea of what are people actually thinking of? What do they think might be valuable to be done? It might be just a good starting point for discussions. Maybe you're just capturing some information here and then say, okay, here we see, for example, a request for that HR joiners, movers, leavers process, and let's have a discussion with HR, because it's not just, hey, we need to put in a tool in place, but it's a bigger process that we need to look at. And maybe we also need to think about integrating some other systems like, our, various finance tools also might also be integrated in here as well. Or there's a range of other possibilities, obviously, then. So yes, you might have then longer discussions and that might lead to something else. But the idea is really, you might start the adoption process through here as well by making sure that people know where to go by submitting their ideas, so that if somebody wants to do something, if they think there's a valuable app, a valuable process to be implemented, they know where to go, they can submit their information, they get some feedback, and ideally that would result in a solution that can then help with solving that business problem. Again, coming back to increasing adoption by the joiner, mover, leavers process was now replaced, or was now improved by putting in a dedicated Power App and some Power Automate flows in the backend. And yes, whole company is now using it, and joiners, movers, leavers process is much better now, for example. I hope you get the idea of what kind of value this can provide to you. There are obviously a range of other things in the CoE toolkit that are also available. I'm not capturing or talking about every single component that is in there. Just showing you some of them that are really quite valuable. There's a lot more that can be done, that could be done. We could probably talk for another hour easily around those, but I thought those things that we just talked about are really some of the very important, very interesting things. Now, key question. So I showed you a range of different CoE toolkit components and parts, and showed you a couple of things that really can help you. Do you actually need to use all of them? Because coming back, for example, to the innovation backlog here, capturing ideas, maybe say, hey, yeah, we've got, because I keep talking about ServiceNow, again, no preference here. You might also have other tools in place, but yeah, maybe you've got some other system already in place to capture ideas. Obviously, then you're not introducing yet another tool to capture, I don't know, app requests or something like that. Maybe you're just continuing with whatever app you have, obviously. Or taking a step back, for example, surveys here. Maybe you're saying, hey, internally, we're using a specific survey tool to continuously ask our colleagues about things. So we're not using here, for example, the CoE toolkit to send out notifications via Flow and get feedback. We continue to use our standard internal feedback tool. Continue to do so. Coming back to, sorry, let me just go back to, for example, these processes here. Do we really need to introduce that lifecycle flow? Are you still using an app? Are you still using your flow? Maybe it's not required. Maybe say, I don't care about apps and flows that have been lying around for 6 years because they've been there for 6 years. Nobody complained. They can lie around for another 6 years or so. Up to you. You need to really focus on what's important to you. How do you prioritize? The CoE toolkit is a big toolkit. There are lots of features and there's a lot of functionality in there. And you've heard during the introduction, I mean, we are a very, very large organization. Even we are not using all of it because we decided there are certain things that we focus on, certain things that would, again, replace existing tools that we have. So we're not going to do that. And there are other certain things that, yeah, didn't seem too valuable to us a while ago. Maybe we will reevaluate again and see if it's getting more important for us. But the key thing is really, you don't need to use all of it. The CoE toolkit is very big, but you can really focus on what is important to you. If you say, I only care about all those additional insights, I don't care about governance processes right now, I don't care about adoption processes, still go ahead, use those insights, figure out how many apps and flows you have, etc. That's providing a lot of value to you, then yeah, that's good enough. You don't need to really, like I said, leverage the full CoE toolkit. And again, coming back to which parts of the CoE toolkit you should be using is really up to you. That's something that obviously I can't tell you. You need to know better what's important to your organization, to your IT department, to yeah, whoever might be required in those discussions. If you have, for example, a need to identify all apps that and all apps and flows that use specific connectors on a regular basis, yeah, focus on the insights part. If you need to make sure that yeah, data loss preventions are properly put in place and need to be updated very regularly, focus on that. Really completely up to you. Now, what I didn't mention here is, but where do you learn more? Quite easy. Go to your favorite search engine and type in Power Platform CoE Toolkit. It will bring you to the corresponding Microsoft Learn documentation. There's some very, very good and detailed information around how do you get started with the toolkit, what does it include, what do you need, all those kind of things. So I skipped all that technical setup part and yeah, focused obviously on the what kind of value it provides, what you should be focusing on, or why you should look into the CoE toolkit. But when it comes to setting it up, all of that is obviously documented by Microsoft, plus supported by the PowerCat team. So constantly getting updated, monthly releases, etc. All right, so I think we are also slowly, so to say, running out of time. And yeah, perfect. We're also nearing the end of my presentation. With that, I think that I'm handing over to Patrick again.
So thank you, Rene, for a great presentation showing us how to govern the Power Platform. And continuing on the topic of governance, I will quickly show you how to govern the rest of your resources, meaning your sites, teams, and groups with Point, our governance security platform for M365 collaboration tools. However, before we can go into governance, we first need to know what our workspaces are and what state they are currently in. So simply put, it all starts with gaining visibility into our resources, knowing what's happening at all times, and being able to manage it and make changes easily. Now, Point will help admins organize data from different sources and admin centers all into one place. But even more so, it will provide that functionality to the content owners as well. Ordinary users that are painfully missing any kind of admin type interface, but still play a crucial role in securing and governing content in the tenant. So they will have the same interface, visibility, and management options as the admins. However, the key difference will be that they'll be scoped only to the content they own and not being able to see or modify anything that they shouldn't be able to do. Now, with great visibility comes great responsibility for us to ensure that you're not just drowning in a bunch of data, but that you can navigate it easily and find what you need to see. So we'll quickly dive into our sites to show you how to achieve that with Point. Now, in our sites overview screen, we have this top navigation that you can see here. That's just your basic workspace type filter. Additionally, we have this pre-created views to quickly show us things like, I don't know, inactive sites or externally shared sites, but we can also use various attributes to further filter out our view, like primary admin sharing settings or sensitivity labels. But where this gets really powerful is in the custom metadata we can create and then assign to our sites to really zero in on things we need to see, like the department or this included in access requests policy. So now that we scoped our view, we can go into site details to see it even further, like things like content, permissions, and some usage analytics metrics. From here, we can also grant access or revoke it, set up different types of alerts, or go to one of many reports like this permission matrix that will show us all of the site permissions down to the file level. However, taking a step back, admins can't really be expected to do this for each and every site, nor do they know who should or shouldn't have access on a particular item. This is up to the content owners. So what admins need is a way to create, define, and delegate those tasks to them. They also need flexibility to apply specific policies to specific workspaces and change it if needed. All of this needs to be automated to reduce both their effort and human error. With that in mind, we'll dive into the settings to check out all the policies we can create. And I'll just give you a short explanation for each of them. We'll start off with access review that are used to send out tasks for owners to review their content, ensuring proper people have access, but more importantly, that something isn't overshare. Now, admins can choose what will be reviewed, be it membership, content, or both, and the frequency at which this will need to be performed. Next up are the minimum and maximum number of owners policy that will ensure that there are always both enough and not too many owners assigned to a site. Now, these policies can work in the text-only mode if you simply want to see what's the state you're currently in, but you can also choose to delegate those tasks to users in case some actions need to be taken. Now, as we all know, we can sometimes get lazy and ignore our tasks, so it's important that we can send out reminders, but we can also choose to reassign unsolved tasks to someone else, for instance, the manager of the owner, which might get their attention. Additionally, we can also choose to archive or delete their resource completely, which will surely get their attention. Next up are the orphaned workspaces policies, which will ensure that even if enough owners are assigned to sites, that they're actually active. Because if they're not, no one will be there to perform the access reviews or other housekeeping tasks you need on the sites. Similarly, we can also enable task delegation here to automatically assign new owners, or we can even have users vote on who should take over. Lastly, we have the access requests, which will enable users to request access to workspaces as either members or owners, and you can attach an approval process to those requests as well. This is especially useful in private teams, where if the policy is applied, that team will become exposed to users, whereas normally it would remain hidden. Now, we can create multiple policies of the same type. We need to apply them to resources that are more or less sensitive. And this can also be highlighted further by assigning different severities to each policy. So now that we have all our policies, we still need to apply them to resources before they become actually useful. We can, of course, do this manually, and perhaps sometimes that will be required, but most likely we'll want to automate this as much as possible. One way of doing it is to attach those policies to various workspace templates admins can create to ensure that they're being applied from the get-go. However, that leaves us with two challenges. One is how should we simply change the policy if the workspace evolves over its lifetime? But the other that will be most common for everyone not starting with a brand new tenant is how can I easily apply all of these policies to my existing workspaces? And with that, we can go to our rules engine to help us with both scenarios. So we'll do this by creating automation rules. And let's quickly name our rule here. And we can also select the priority, which will be needed if there are multiple rules matching the workspace to find out which one will come up on top. And how they're matched with workspaces is by the conditions we can set. So, for instance, let's say I want to target specific teams, maybe those that are private, but will for some reason require a lot of guest users to be added, indicating potentially a lot of tickets for the IT teams. So we'll use the workspace type, change it over to teams, save that condition. Then we'll use privacy, which is already set to private. And I'll use this number of guests greater than 1. Any number can work, but you get the gist. And finally, we'll choose to apply policy. So I'll do access request with the owner approval, but since this will be externally shared, maybe I want to attach the access review with external sharing for that to also be periodically checked. Once I'm all done, I can even preview my policy to see all of the affected workspaces and make changes to the conditions if needed. However, if I'm all set, I can simply go ahead and create that rule. So once this is all set up, we're back to visibility. And from the security and compliance dashboard, we can take a look at all of the violations that have been detected by our policy. We can go inside details, and admins can here take actions like accept risk, ask owners to delegate, or even resolve it themselves. Similarly, in the governance dashboard, we can take a look at all of our scheduled access reviews to see how they're progressing, and all of the delegated security and compliance tasks. As you can see, we still have provisioning, which will show us how creation of new resources is faring, and the lifecycle management, which will show us all of our inactive workspaces, ensuring that they're being decommissioned instead of just lingering on in the tenant. However, those are topics that we don't have time for now, but if any of this piqued your interest, I invite you to try a free demo available at our website. And with that, Patrick, I hope you're unmuted because I'll bring it back to you for some Q&A.
Yes, I think now everything works fine. Thank you, Bruno, for the excellent demo. And yeah, thanks, Rene, for the great presentation. Yeah, so we reached our Q&A session with Rene. So we have already a question prepared, but yeah, if others has any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function. Rene, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, so first question is from Barry, so thanks for the question. Can the CoE be deployed successfully with a Power Platform developer community plan and environment? He would like to trial the toolkit before having to purchase premium licenses.
It's a very good question. I'm not entirely sure right now what's part of the developer plan. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. Yes, it is a bit tricky because you need the premium license, because what I didn't mention is obviously that a range of the CoE toolkits actually really require Dataverse, require other parts that are premium. So you need additional license or licenses. When it comes now to checking whether you can use the CoE toolkit, for example, with a specific developer license or something like that, I would recommend actually checking the CoE toolkit documentation, and also then GitHub, where the PowerCat team that develops the toolkit actively also provides guidance and support. So if you've got a question like that, I would actually point you over there, because it is a very valid question. It does make sense, but I can't give you any advice here right now, sadly, or no specific guidance at least.
Yeah, thanks Rene for the answer, and yeah, thanks Barry for the question. Yeah, while we wait maybe additional questions from our audience, yeah, let me ask you a question also, Rene. What are the requirements for using data export with the CoE starter kit?
Sorry, say again.
What are the requirements for using data export with the CoE starter kit?
So depending obviously on what you want to export, I mean, if you want to, there are different ways how this question could be actually interpreted. I was just thinking of two different options. One is, for example, you might have, again, a number of apps and flows, and you want to know, or the CoE toolkit needs to know where they're coming from. Where do you get that data? Where does the CoE toolkit get that data? So one possibility here is then to say use the data export functionality in the Power Platform Admin Center. So some built-in standard functionality to export your, simply said, your app flow, other analytics data to an Azure data lake, so to some data storage there. What you then get is basically a big bunch of JSON files that get updated daily with information around which apps are there, which flows are there, how often have they been used, etc., etc. Nothing that you want to look at manually, but the toolkit can be put basically on top of that and work with that. And that's a relatively straightforward process then to set that up. Usually, again, it requires some additional Azure data storage, but once set up, then the CoE toolkit can leverage that. The other option then separately then to get that inventory ready, besides the data export, is then to leverage the current inventory flows that are available. That's the, you could say, the old-fashioned way of how the toolkit was working for the longest time, which is also good, but the larger the organization, the more data is, the trickier it is. But yes, the data export functionality is, I would say, the moving to become the preferred option if possible. It makes things more stable, you get some additional insights, and as mentioned, it's built into the Power Platform Admin Center directly as well, so you're really using some standard functionality there as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Rene. Yeah, in the meantime, we got 3 additional questions. So yeah, let's get into them. So yeah, Chris asked that he mentioned actually that he heard that there are some limitations for analysis functionalities for very large environments, only in preview. And he asked to explain if this is an issue for those environments.
It can be, and I can confirm that we've encountered that actually as well. As mentioned before, we're a very large organization. We're spread across a few different tenants, but one of those tenants is still fairly big, lots of usage, and the way the CoE toolkit was initially envisioned and how it was working, it couldn't cope with a very large number of apps and flows in specific environments, resulting in some limitations there. The data export functionality that we just mentioned, I think fixes, I don't want to say it fixes it completely, but it helps a lot with it. Meaning then, if you are still a very large organization, I'm really talking about, I'm just going to say 30,000 people and above probably or so, there may still be potential issues again, but it's hard to say where and when exactly they might appear. As mentioned, the PowerCat team was working on improvements. The data export functionality helps a lot with it, and it should reduce the potential risk of other issues a lot actually then.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rene. We have two questions from Eloy. Can the CoE inactivity notification be easily modified? The follow-up question is, the emails then go to the end users?
Yes, so what you can do is, I mean, I showed a couple of screenshots actually, which come directly from Microsoft, which are, you could really say, the standard out-of-the-box notifications, but you can customize them. I mean, there are certain limits how much can be customized, but there's still a good amount. So it doesn't look like it's coming from Microsoft anymore. You can make it look like it's really coming from your organization. You can provide additional text, additional details, etc. So there are possibilities there. Sorry, what was the second question?
The emails then go to the end users.
Yes. They go to the specific owner of the app. So whenever you create an app or flow, you're obviously listed as the owner of that app or flow then, and those are then the accounts that get contacted. So if you're simply said only an end user of an app, you will not receive any notification from the CoE toolkit. It really only goes to makers, so the developers.
Okay, thanks, Rene. Okay, so I guess this last question, what are the best practices for updating the starter kit? Should it be tested on a separate tenant? And thanks, Anis, for the question.
So separate tenant is a possibility, but it is also a risk. Because thinking about what is required to set it up, you might require some service accounts, plus it might work in one tenant, but not in another tenant if the one tenant that you're testing in is very small, whereas the other tenant is very big and might have additional other policies in place. So, for example, just sharing our own strategy with it. We do have a test tenant actually, so completely separate tenant, but it has completely separate accounts. And what it means, instead of having a couple thousand or 10,000 colleagues and a lot of apps and flows in there, there are, I don't know, 50 or 100 people in there, and probably same number of apps and flows, so not really a lot. It helps us to actually do reviews with the CoE toolkit in a completely separate tenant to make sure then that we've got that, we're doing a review and not impacting anything else. But we do not consider any tests there complete. What we still do is then we go back to the other tenant then and say we've got actually a test environment for the CoE toolkit and a production environment for the CoE toolkit. Obviously, it's a bit risky again because the test environment in the production tenant should not have any notifications going out. So if you accidentally turn on, for example, the welcome email flow in both environments, people receive 2 email notifications, or the inactivity flows, you wouldn't turn them on, obviously. But strategy is try to test it as much as you can. So if you have access to another tenant, definitely do it. If you don't, at least test it in a second environment. And separately, when it comes to updating the CoE toolkit, I mean, recommendation is from Microsoft to do it at least every 3 months. I would say actually it's sometimes okay to wait a bit longer, but don't wait too long, because obviously you're losing out on bug fixes, stability, potentially new features, etc. So try to do it every 3 to 6 months is the recommendation. And again, establish a standard update process. There's guidance from Microsoft how you perform the update, but don't do it directly in your production environment. While there are not too many risks, obviously, to your, what do you call it, your company overall, to the citizen developers, etc., the apps and flows won't be impacted by the update. You still want to avoid that suddenly emails go out to everybody with a standardized email content. Rather, you want to make sure you've got that properly tested and reviewed before you turn all these things on.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Rene. All right, we reached the end of the Q&A. So thank everyone that submitted your question. Once again, thank you all for joining us on today's webinar. As mentioned, everyone who registered for this event will receive a recording of the webinar. Thanks again to Bruno and to our special guest, Rene Modery, for joining us today and giving this great presentation. It was a pleasure to having you with us. Anything you would like to say to our audience before we wrap things up?
Yeah, not much. Just thank you for joining. It was a pleasure presenting to you.
Great. Yeah. If anyone have further questions regarding Syskit Point or any of our products, please reach out to us at sales@syskit.com. Again, it was a pleasure having you all here, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.